if you're wanting to be somewhere else, I can't help you with that. I'll be playing fiddle today, and I might grab my nickel harpa if people are interested. Um, but I was gonna start with fiddle, and I put a link in the bulletin board, but I'll put a link in the chat as well to a Google Drive that has some sheet music, and it also has a Google Doc that says links. And I threw some stuff in there just now today, and then I'm gonna add some more probably tomorrow. Last year, I put together a whole list of like band recommendations and music recommendations. So I'll probably copy that and bring it over, and and I'll put some more sort of resources and thoughts into that Google Doc as well, so that you guys can take that with you. Um, yeah, so I think I'll get started if that sounds okay with people. Um, I've done a couple of these Lark camps before, and I've frequently taught tunes primarily with my time with y'all. And I do want to teach some tunes, but I also wanted to have this be kind of a weekend deep dive on Polska, which is the main, I would say, kind of the main tune and dance type that is found in Swedish folk music. There's lots of other kinds of dances as well, but Polska is really kind of a big umbrella type of tune and a type of dance. And so I wanted to, if you guys are okay with it, if you're down with it, talk a little bit and show you some examples. I am currently living in Sweden. I'm doing my master's degree at the Royal Academy of Music in Stockholm. And so I'm kind of like in this all the time. And it's been really fun to go really deep on this nerdy stuff in Swedish folk tradition. So as I said, Polska is the main kind of dance and tune, and it's a word that means both of the same thing. Dancing and playing are really, really interconnected in Scandinavian folk tradition still. There are sessions, and people will have jam sessions where there's just music happening, but the main tradition is really to play and dance. So a Polska refers to both of those things at the same time. It means literally Polish, like it's the Swedish word for Polish, as in people from Poland. And it is a very old style of dance that did originally come from Poland hundreds of years ago, when Sweden was kind of an imperial force in Europe. They had connections with Poland, and the Polska was a popular form of dance back then, 400-500 years ago, and it was brought back to Sweden and then really became kind of a Scandinavian and Swedish dance type. For reference as well, you might come across the word Pols, which is just spelled Pols, and that's the Norwegian term for the same basic thing. It means Polska. And in Norway, there are different kinds of Pols as well. So both of those words are kind of umbrella terms for the same thing. Borders in Scandinavia historically have also been a bit murky, especially between Norway and Sweden. And it's really reflected, I think, in the folk music, where you have these regional traditions that might cross over border areas. And so they're called something different in Norway and they're called something different in Sweden, but it's really actually one tradition. And it's the modern border that kind of divides things. So something to bear in mind. I thought I would start by kind of showing you examples of the dancing. So let me see. I will share my screen and I will share sound, hopefully, as well. Can you guys see that? Hopefully. Awesome. I'm going to share sound. Hopefully it's not crazy loud. Here. This is a slang polska, which is a type of polska that is evenly divisible in 16th notes. And the dancers are stepping on each beat in the measure. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It's kind of a free-form dance in some ways. This is a really old style of polska that has been sort of reconstructed through descriptions of the dance. It wasn't really a formal living tradition in this style of improvisational moves and changes. It has a lot that's kind of in common with the old style of Swedish minuet as well, which is similar to other minuet dance forms. So that's one kind of polska. 16th note polska, meaning subdivisible by 16th notes. It's a really even rhythm. You can put a metronome on it and it's not going to mess anything up. Polskas have 3 beats to a measure. I should have said that at the very start. That's the main defining part of what a polska is. So that's a slang polska or a 16th note polska. And then I thought I would show you another evenly subdividable polska, but subdividable in triplets. So it's called a triplet polska, is kind of an umbrella term for these kinds. So this is a polska from Jämtland, which is in the north of Sweden. And this is a much more defined style of dance, where there's sort of formalized steps, I guess. There's a walking part and a turning part. So you can see the walking that they're doing now, and then they're doing a turn. It's much faster, the rhythm and the tempo is faster, but you can still put a click track to it. It's an even polska. The rhythm within the measure is symmetrical, is kind of how I like to think of it. And then I thought I would show you, these are the tunes I was thinking about playing for you all as well. This is a polska from Älvdalen, which is one of these border regions that I was talking about. Älvdalen is kind of in central Sweden, but way to the west, right up against the border with Norway. And parts of Älvdalen and this part of Dalarna, which is kind of the county, used to be Norwegian. So there's a lot of crossover. This is also a triplet polska. And it's pretty even. This style of polska will really depend on who's playing it. But you can see in the dance that it's the same kind of walking and turning, and they're able to kind of bounce on each of the measures. And then I thought I would show you one of the more wild kinds of polskas. This is a Finnskog pols. And Finnskogen is the region, it's another border region a little south of where we just were in Älvdalen. And it's this forest along the border of Norway and Sweden on the west part of Sweden, where a lot of Finnish people were forcibly relocated several hundred years ago to work the land and farm. And they had a different style of farming in Finland than they used in Sweden at that time. They used slash and burn farming. And so the Finnish people were also not very well liked within the community. So we have this sort of isolated tradition that emerged in this region, and it's called Finnskogs pols. And skog means forest, so it literally means the Finnish forest. So it's still the basic framework of the polska, where there's a walking part and a turning part, but it's a very different energy. And this is where we start to get into some what I call asymmetrical polskas. And this style of polska is kind of, I would say it's kind of unique in that it has a shorter third beat than first and second beat. So it kind of almost feels a bit lopsided and really energetic. I'm going to leave links to these dances in the Google Doc, and I'm going to put more up. I was going to start today with some symmetrical polskas and talking about them, and then maybe over the next couple days getting a little more into the asymmetry. I really like the Finnskog pulse as an example because I think they're really fun to play and they're really energetic. And they're really kind of different than a lot of other polska types. But there's a lot of short first beat polskas. Lots and lots of asymmetrical short first beat polskas. So I think that it's there's kind of a whole world here. And if you guys are on board, of course I can change directions if you want. But there's so much within polska, and it's so integral to Swedish folk music and folk tradition, and everything is kind of ends up being related to polska. And I think it's something where we tend to learn a couple polskas and you kind of can play them and know what they are, but don't really know that there's lots of these kind of details get left out sometimes. I thought I would maybe look at the chat and answer some questions. So who is playing the slang polska? The information for who's playing and who's dancing will be in those YouTube links. But that tune, I've actually taught, I think, at Lark before that they're dancing in that video clip. It's a slang polska from Barsebek. It's a really nice tune. And then polka versus polska. This is probably, I should have started with this as well. A polka and a polska are two completely different things, other than the fact that they're both kinds of dances and tunes. But polska is, like I said, it literally means Polish, and polka, I think, is just a term for a kind of dance. I don't think it comes from a region necessarily. I don't actually know where polka comes from. Polka is in 2/4 time, duple meter, kind of as was talked there. Da, 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 da. The measures are 2 beats. And a polska, as I mentioned, are 3 beat tunes. And where those beats fall within a measure is where we get really exciting. But overall, generally, a polska is a 3 beat tune. And it's different than a waltz. We have waltzes in Scandinavia as well, and I've taught some for Lark before. Those are also in 3/4 time. I don't even like to say 3/4 time for polska because there's so many that are divisible in triplets, and they're closer to something like a 9/8 time when you write them out. But polskas have 3 beats. It's also, maybe this is interesting, but there's 2 sort of general groups of dance and music types within Scandinavian folk music, and polska is considered an older dance tradition. I mean, it existed for longer in the region than polka, Swedish, waltz, hambo. Those more modern styles of dance are all kind of in their own group, and they were really popular in the mid to late 1800s. And polskas and older forms of dances and tunes, along with polska, something like Spring Lake, lots of Norwegian dances, telegangar, telespringar. Those are all much older styles of very regionally specific dances. So you'll have a dance and a tune that exist in one town, and if you go 100 kilometers east, they'll have their own different kind of dance and tune that's flavored a little different. So there's a lot of regional specificity as well. So I thought we could play some. This is like a very basic overview. I think it's nice to start with some of the more symmetrical tunes. And then, like I said, tomorrow I was planning to maybe get into some of the more asymmetrical tunes. I'm planning on playing fiddle. I have put that Google form in the chat, and I can also put the PDFs to the tunes I'll teach in the chat. How about I play a couple first, just to make sure that they're not ones y'all know already? For 16th note Polska, I was thinking of Vive Lira Polska, number 1. Is that something everybody already knows? Some head shakes, some of these. Cool, I'll play it and you can see if you recognize it. Sound good? Thumbs up? Thumbs down? Thumbs up. Cool. It's a pretty simple tune, but I think it's just delightful. I'll put it in the chat so you can download a PDF if wanted. It's in G major. And like I said, it's a 16th note Polska. So that's the vibe. This would be, you could definitely play this for slang Polska, that first dance I showed where you're walking and kind of holding hands and stepping on every single beat of the dance. It's a tune that's from Gotland, which is an island off the coast of Sweden, sort of southeast of where I am currently in Stockholm. And I have learned this from Marcus Svensson, who is a wonderful nyckelharpa player who lives on Gotland. So as I've usually taught in the past, I think what I'm going to do is play just the A part on a loop, and listen for a while at your leisure and jump in if you want. It's a pretty simple tune, so I think it probably won't take too much, but we can go into shorter, smaller phrases as well. But I'm going to start with just the A part. Starts on G. Break it into smaller sections because they're kind of repetitive, but then also a little bit tricky. So here's the first 2 bars. And again, and. Two more times. Last time, and. Good. Next section. put those two together. Again. Second half of the A part starts just the same, so it'll be that's the same. And then we have our little ending. Just that part again, and couple more times. One more time. Good. Whole A part together. I'll play it on a loop 3 or 4 times. And that's our A part. We'll move on to the B part. I'll play it on a loop a couple times so you can get it in your head, and then we'll break it down just the same way. So the whole second half of the B part is stuff you already know how to do. So we'll break down just that first half of the B part for you. It starts on a B. And again, and again. One more time, and good. Next section. Good. Putting those together. And then let's play through our second half of the B part that's the same half of the A part. Good. Let's go through the whole B part on a loop. 1, 2, 3. think we've arrived at playing the whole tune time. There is sheet music to this, and I did put bowings in it for those of us who have bows. And I think it's really helpful on a tune like this to take a look. I try to make sure it's clear through the video, but I know it's not an ideal way to learn through a screen. But this pattern of long, long, short, short, long, long, short, short, I would consider that to be perhaps one of the most foundational polska bowing patterns that there are. And you can find it both in tunes like this, which is kind of a slang polska, 16th note polska, and also very, very often with triplet polskas. So hopefully we'll have time to play one of those as well, and you can see that pattern in action in a very different feeling tune. Yeah, I think we are ready to play the whole tune, perhaps? That's how it starts, on a G. We'll go a little bit under dance tempo, but then I think we're going to be able to play it. Someone asked before I start, are there accents on first beats or another beat? I would say for this type of polska, where it's even beats through the measure and subdividable by 16th, deka, 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 especially a slang polska, because there are other kinds of 16th note polskas, but this style of dancing where you're stepping on every beat, the accents are really kind of on every beat if you want to put them there. It doesn't have to be a really over-the-top thing, but how about I play it once as if I was playing for dancers? I'll close my eyes and picture myself in a barn somewhere. feel it when I play it, as I would like to, is almost like there's a little bit of like a train chugging. I'm really feeling sort of the eighth note subdivision. I think this is an example of a tune I might almost call an eighth note polska because it has that kind of feeling of da 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 da. So I would say you can put a little bit of an emphasis on that first, or the every beat, and then also maybe if you want to add in a little bit of a groove to it, I would advise against the danger that some of us, myself included, who grew up with American folk music and a heavy kind of a backbeat shuffle, to not fall into the we don't want that yakadekada. I mean, that's fun, but it won't sound so Swedish. There's some questions about ornamentation. I think ornamentation is such a large question. I'm almost tempted to, well, we can see how we feel. Let's play through the tune so we get the notes in, and then we can see about, we could either go to another tune, which would provide a place of comparison for things like ornamentation as well. But I can talk a little bit about what I do in this tune before we go on. But let's play more. Get it in your heads. All right, so a little slower than what I was just doing. 1 and 3. Ornamentation is a good thing to talk briefly about. So I was thinking while I was just playing how I achieve that kind of not a backbeat but a groove, I will say, when playing this kind of tune, especially incorporating this bowing pattern of long, long, short, short, long, long, short, short. It's actually something that you're doing in the bow. I think it's kind of similar to to the mechanics of something like pulse bowing in like old time fiddle. And there's this great video of Bruce Molsky talking about his bowing that's on YouTube, and I think that you can take what he's talking about and apply it to so many kinds of music. So maybe I'll throw that up in the Google Doc as well. But it's a combination of speed and pressure that you're using within a bow stroke. So for a downstroke on just any note, you're starting the note, and then about halfway through the bow, you're both speeding up a little bit, and like I think of it as kind of turning my hand into the bow and just pressing down a little bit through my index finger. And this is true on nickel harpa, cello, same kind of basic mechanic. I'll try to overemphasize. So my bow never stops moving. I'm always moving the bow. And it's the same mechanic on an upstroke. So down and up, I'll just do this on a loop and you can join in and try it out if you want. Fun thing to experiment with is the ratio of pressure to speed in that accent. You'll have a different feeling, a different sound that comes through if it's more speed. I'll play once that's just speeding up and barely any pressure. And then I'll try it with pressure and less speed. They feel kind of different to me. With a tune like this, it's kind of, this feels like kind of just like a magical fairy kind of feeling tune to me, where it's really sweet. So I tend to use more of that speed in the accent as I'm playing this tune rather than pushing into the bow. I have a nice light bow stroke, and then I'm adding speed when I want those accents. So you can go more subtle or less subtle with it. That's what I like to do. So I think that's an ornamentation style that I think we forget about sometimes. I forget about sometimes when I focus so much on things like trills or vibrato, depending on what you're playing. But there's a lot that you can do just with a bow. And that might be something that I kind of pull from my experience as a nickel harpa player, where we can't do vibrato, we can't bend notes, we can't slide into notes. Since we have at least one nickel harpa on screen, maybe I'll pull mine out and play this tune on nickel harpa so you can kind of see what I mean as well. For anyone uninitiated, this is a nickel harpa. It means key fiddle, because we've got keys over here, and then it's bowed like a fiddle. I kind of assume sometimes that a lot of folks like y'all have already seen one, but of course there's always newbies, and I'm always excited to share it. So it's a traditional Swedish instrument. So we can't do vibrato or slide into notes or bend notes simply because we're playing with keys. So on nickel harpa, I think we do end up using the bow more for ornamentations. Let me know if it's too loud or not. it's a different instrument than fiddle for sure. And it's beautiful in its own way, but it's also a little more limited in some of those elements of music that I come from fiddle. I started with fiddle. I've played it much longer. And I really had to kind of change how I approached using a bow when I was on this instrument because it's quite different. This is a good example. I actually I pull some of the double stops from my nickel harpa playing back into fiddle, so I can play and show you what I mean. I'm actually borrowing this nickel harpa right now. Someone asked who made it. This was made by Esbjørn Hogmark, and if you're familiar with Väsen, the band, this is the nickel harpa that was played in Väsen for many, many years. It's Olav Johansson's old nickel harpa. My main instrument needs a lot of help, so we're fixing it together, but he's letting me borrow one for now. For a double stop, which is another kind of ornamentation, is like the notes you use and the drones that you're using in a tune. For this one, on nickel harpa, I would play it like this. So what I'm doing is basically playing G, this note, as a drone, because it works really nicely with this tune. And because on nickel harpa, it's one of the nice things that you can do is kind of press a key down. So I'm pressing it with my pinky. The instrument is tuned slightly different than a fiddle. So this string is a C, one note lower than a D. So I play a G with my pinky finger. And then I have all these other fingers here to play the melody. And I can play almost the whole melody that way. So when I do play it on fiddle, I like to take that ornament, even if it's a little bit tricky on fiddle. It's not quite as easy because we don't use our pinky. It's a good practice in intonation, but I like to sometimes leave my ring finger on the G there. Kind of as long as I can until I have to move off of it because I need that finger for a different note. So that would be an example of a really nice ornamentation that I like to use on this tune is pulling double stops, and I think this is a fun example of when I'm kind of swapping techniques between my two instruments. And I did learn this from Marcus Svensson, who's a nickel harpa player. So I have it from nickel harpa as kind of the ground for it. It's worth mentioning as well that it's called Vivlira Polska, and Vivlira is the Swedish word for a hurdy-gurdy. So this tune is actually a hurdy-gurdy tune, which is one of the reasons that it works nicely with a drone. Like I was playing a G, you can play G under almost the whole thing. It would function musically to have a drone. It's very much kind of a drone tune, coming from hurdy-gurdy tradition. The third kind of ornamentation is, of course, trills. We've got trills in Swedish music. I don't think I use too many of them, and I don't like to assign too many rules to trills. For this, I would say it's a lot of kind of just one note up or one note down. Okay, maybe. Something like that. Where you're adding a trill kind of just to accent the note. It can go along with the ornamentation of the bow stroke going faster. And that's a common kind of trill, I would say, in Swedish and Scandinavian folk music, is just one note, like a mordant, would be what it's called in like classical tradition, where you're just going up and back down, and really quickly, like almost like you're trying to sneak it past someone that fast. But I'd say I don't use an enormous amount of trills, and that is something that does vary by region as well. So a different type of polska might use a lot more trills than this one. I think this is kind of a sort of a bare bones style tradition, and I suspect that has to do kind of with the specific tune's background and where it comes from, being a Vive Lira tune, a hurdy-gurdy tune, where there's lots of drones on a hurdy-gurdy. So there's enough going on that it's not going to maybe be the most trill-oriented, ornamented tune. It's kind of simple. Are there any more questions? If you have questions about buying a nyckelharpa or where to get one, you can email me. And I'm happy. It's not the most practical method of just shouting Swedish people's names at you here, but I'm always happy to point people towards nyckelharpas and help you find one. For the last 16th notes on the first line, can we slur the 3 16th notes? Yeah, that's a good question. Again, like my idea of folk music is kind of like whatever works for you and makes you happy, but the stylistic element of this is actually exactly as written, with it's long, short, short. This is a style of bowing. It's another kind of very common Swedish bowing pattern in tunes and types of tunes that are subdividable by 16th notes, is to play I think it has to do with kind of keeping the framework and the groove of the melody and the tune in that sort of straight up and down, not falling into too much of a swing, you might say, or like a shuffle feeling. That's me slurring 3 and then 1. And it kind of adds this accent for that last 16th note, because you're having to bring the bow quickly and fast. So playing it with the slurring 2 16th notes is a little bit more even and straight, I guess, symmetrical, for the groove. And that's like kind of a groove within one measure. So it's small details, but that's why I wrote that bowing pattern that way. There'll be times in melodies where you do slur different things based around what's practical for getting your bow to the right place to start a measure, basically. And I also will say, I think a lot of the bowing patterns, especially for slang polska, you don't need to worry too much about starting every measure on a downstroke, for example. That I know that's very strong in some traditions and fiddle playing, but with these polskas that are really deka 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 deka, you can be a little bit more relaxed about if you end up starting on an upstroke and just add a slur somewhere or take one away. Cool. I think we should play it a little bit more. For folks playing rhythm, like left hand on the accordion, what kind of rhythm or beat would I suggest? 3 beats are even. This is maybe something I could take on another day as well. I have a guitar, and I've thought about maybe having some like playing chord or accompaniment to a polska. But for a slang polska, down, down, da da da, down, down, da da da, down, da 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 da. You can really kind of play a lot within the beat because it is symmetrical and even. And I mentioned at the very beginning, but if anybody wasn't here, last year I made a recommendation list of lots of bands I like and people to listen to. And I'll be sure to put some of that together as well. And there's some really great guitarists or accordion players, sort of comp instruments that'll be on that list. And maybe I can put a little blurb about what they are so you can check that out if you play those instruments. Cool. So I think just based on today, what I'd like to do tomorrow and Sunday, tomorrow I want to talk about asymmetrical polskas. And some triplet polskas, some kind of funkier, wackier stuff, if you guys are willing to go with me on that journey. And then on Sunday, maybe I'll reserve some time for rhythm instruments, if that's okay, and talk a little bit more about maybe playing plectrum instruments or chord instruments, and how that could work. And we'll take this tune, we'll take whatever tunes I teach tomorrow and use those as a framework for it. Does that sound cool to people? Yes? Cool. All right, let's play this one again, though. A couple more times in our last 4 minutes. 1, 2, 3. There was a question earlier about my fiddle. It's an old American-made fiddle that someone gave to my grandmother. One of her friends gave it to her, and now I have it. So, I don't know if the 2-minute warning was given, but I've been keeping an eye on the clock, and I know there's 2 minutes. Yeah, there'll be info on the bulletin board. That link to the Google Drive is on the bulletin board. I haven't tried this tune as around, but I think it probably would work, actually. And that sounds delightful, so let me know if you try that. Yeah, and any nickel harpa questions can come to me. I'll make sure my email is listed on the bulletin board as well. And maybe I'll play some nickel harpa tomorrow and Sunday as well for anyone interested. Yeah. This is so fun.
Thank you so much, Amy.
Cool. See you guys tomorrow.
Thank you, Amy.